we actually believe that the category of role-playing games is really more of a broader category of what we call online narrative play. And really, when we think about what role is in the future, we're really talking about creating spaces for people to have meaningful online narrative play with friends.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Logan Dwight. Logan is the co-founder of Role, an online video play platform for RPGs and the communities around them. It started off as an iOS app back in 2015 that they created with their co-founder Ian Hirschfeld, and have since relaunched to cater to a new remote and video-friendly world we now live in. Today, we're going to talk about the journey of Role and some of the hardships they've faced, the design behind tabletop RPGs and what makes them so powerful, and the future of games that cater to the imagination and joy of storytelling. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 4 of season 3 of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome Logan to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. I love your opening music. It's very to me, it immediately takes me to nostalgic like JRPG, like Japanese like when your characters are either in the lobby area or in town, and it's supposed to be exciting, but you're going to the market and picking up gear for your party. The big RPG nerd in me immediately just hears that when I hear the intro music, which is a good thing in my mind. So
I love it. I appreciate it. I'll keep it then. So there's a ton of cool questions. I love your energy and your vibe. Doing research on you, I just felt like you're such an easy to talk to person and someone that I really just wanted to dig deeper into your whole story, the story of Role. But I do want to just jump right into a question that I think is really important, that a lot of the people I've had on the show are in the game development industry, and I think RPGs and tabletop RPGs are this section of the games market that I didn't actually feel like I would have had the opportunity to talk about. I'm personally not a big tabletop RPG player, but I do have a lot of friends that do regular campaigns and that kind of thing, and I'm very interested in it. I'm just on the outside of participating in it. I think I will one day when the opportunity comes up. But one thing that I think is really important about tabletop RPGs, and I think what Role are doing, is the role of a game master. So I would love for you to explain to the audience what is a game master and how it plays a part in the kind of structure of Role as a service.
yeah, absolutely. I have kind of a two-part answer to that question, one of which may surprise you, given that context. But the first thing I'll simply say, as far as what is a game master, what is the role in general role playing? So the kind of traditional definition of a game master, and every game kind of actually also has different terms for this. Some games call it a maestro, some games call it a ref. The systems and mechanics of the game determine what this person's function is. But the overall kind of larger umbrella that you could say that this falls under is the person who basically they are playing the role of the world where the rest of the players play push up against. And one of the things that we say a lot at Role, and I think as a community in general with role playing, we say that the thing that makes this medium special over any other type of gaming, over other types of video games that we love, and even frankly over other types of tabletop games, is that the game is the people. The people are the game. Everything else is kind of secondary. And so the game master, you could make the argument that in many games, especially some of the more popular games, things like D&D and whatnot, the game master is actually kind of the foundation or the building block that the game is kind of built on top of, right? Everybody is playing in an imaginary space, a liminal space, with the game master and with each other. And the game master's job is, again, depending on the game, it can be sometimes to be the person who understands the structure and the rules, so they can help create pacing and structure and play, help the story move. When you when you notice that there's too much downtime, for example, if people are getting bored, like it's the game master's responsibility to help introduce excitement. It's also the game master's responsibility to sometimes, like, again, like help kind of referee rulings on what happens, right? So there's not always a rule for everything. So that's why the game master is a great kind of additional person there to have as a resource who can basically say like, oh, like this doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of people, as the medium has evolved, a lot of people see game masters essentially like the organizer. Like it's the person who kind of brings the group together to play. And there's something very special about that. Obviously, it's a very special kind of social pact that you make, whether you're playing a single one-off game session with somebody or you're playing like a recurring, campaign story where you meet every week. So I think like that's kind of thing where it's like, this is the person who brings the group together. And like I said, different games have different levels of expectations upon that role. Some games it's very heavy, right? Like you could argue that in the traditional structure of like a Dungeons and Dragons, the game master's role is quite heavy. They have a lot of rules and things that they are expected to know, and they have more of the reins on the kind of walls and structure of the story and adventure and what can and can happen. And whereas like there's other types of games where the game master's role is really more to just be like a bit of a referee and let the players make the story themselves, where it's a lot more freeform, a lot more open-ended. And then there's all sorts of things in between. So the secondary answer I was going to also note, though, that I think is maybe the surprising thing is the role of the game master is actually something that this industry and community, and especially our platform, while we still think it's very important, we actually don't think that it is strictly the future of this type of play. There is a growing popularity for what's called GM-less play, game masterless play, and many very talented game designers all across the industry. Everybody from like up and coming indies to small studios to even some of the bigger press houses have started to create either standalone games that are designed to be played with no GM or optional rules for their games that allow you to play them in a GM-less way. And usually what that does is there's different ways to do it. People sometimes do it through like prompts or like random decks that you draw from or things like that. But what it does is it allows the group to share the responsibility of storytelling and kind of refereeing the experience with each other. And so that's not necessarily a new phenomenon, but I think the popularity of it has certainly grown in a new way, especially with the explosive growth of role playing, and especially with the growth of role playing online. Because what's happening is you're getting lots of groups of people who have either never played before or who are more casual, who just want to be able to jump on and play a quick game with friends, and they don't want to have to prep. Nobody wants to have to like take on the responsibility of GMing, and so this idea that you don't need one, that we can all just tell the story together, is becoming more and more popular. And so that's a software challenge that we're also trying to solve at Roll. Is like, how do we build better tools that support both styles of play? Because I think we're going to see some really interesting things in the next few years as to where that trend goes.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like even before COVID, there was this resurgence of, well, just this growth of tabletop RPGs. I'm thinking of like Stranger Things. I think that reference gets brought up a lot, but just D&D being brought into the mainstream, as well as just games in general being more adopted by a bigger audience. And I think COVID brought a huge amount of challenges to that market. But I do see the kind of natural evolution of it becoming online. Games flourished last year with so many people locked in and going to their PCs, and I see what you guys are doing at Roll as a perfect solution to that problem of the people that love those kinds of experiences. One thing I read is when you talk about RPGs online and just that whole market, I read in your latest update that you guys created a feature called Ping, and I'd love for you to just explain what that feature is and what it does and why you guys implemented it.
Yeah, so there is a kind of growing trend. Trend is maybe not the right word, but there's I don't know another way to explain it. There's a growing adoption of what's called safety tools in the role-playing space. And safety tools in this case are there to protect somebody's mental and emotional boundaries, their personal safety, because one of the things that is amazingly powerful about role-playing games, and anybody who's really played one like will tell you and agree, is like they are so transformatively intimate. Like you dive in, and by the end you feel like you know the people that you've played with, even if you're playing with total strangers. And when you're playing with people that you're friends with or whatever, it's a great bonding experience. I have had many instances now of people who, once they've gotten really introduced to the joys of role playing, especially online, it started to replace many of their other social gaming hobbies. It's like, okay, this is what I do because it's so powerful, and it's so you feel so invested, and you really feel like you're not playing an avatar, you're playing a character that is an extension of you, right? It's why part of what we like, we have like a brand slogan for role that says every world, every story, every version of you. Because I think people really do feel, and I certainly feel, that like every story that I tell when role playing is an extension of me as a person. And so the things that you have to keep in mind with that is you do run into a lot of cases where people can have important personal boundaries that are at risk of being crossed, sometimes unintentionally, often unintentionally. And so what's happened is a number of very talented people all across the world have developed different systems for player safety. And there's popular ones like a system called the X card system, where you could basically use like a card that's like a X that basically says like this thing is crossing my boundaries, and I want to pause or rewind or pretend that didn't happen. There's systems like lines and veils and whatnot. But what we ended up doing is when we started sitting down to really create the first iterations of our product with Roll, we knew, we were like, this has to be part of the DNA of the product from the very beginning. Like, this can't be an afterthought. This can't be something that we do later. It has to be part of what we do from the very beginning, because at Roll, one of the most important things to us is this feeling of safety and inclusion, right? This feeling that everyone can come and play on Roll. Everybody can feel like they're represented, and everybody can feel safe, that you're not at risk of personal or emotional discomfort or injury. And so we actually worked with two really brilliant consultants. So Lauren Bryant Monk and Kiana Shaw, who are very talented game designers in their own right, and also active safety consultants for the role-playing game space. And they helped us kind of go through a curated catalog of all sorts of different safety systems that exist today from all different authors. And the reason why I keep reiterating that there's all different safety systems is because it's actually important, in our opinion, to not pick one, because the different safety systems that exist all exist for different reasons. Different people have different ways that they can or that they do and do not want to express their boundaries. For some, a system that draws a lot of attention to their boundary being crossed is actually really bad for them, right? They might want a way to do it more discreetly, but for other people, they might need something that requires discussion. Every group is different. And so different safety systems cater to different groups, different individuals. And so what we did is we worked with Kiana and Lauren, and we spent many months going through things with them and trying to get to what we felt was the easiest to learn and simplest abstraction of like, what are the basic tools that every safety system could use. And I want to be clear, like, what we have today is really only even just the foundation. Like, we're continuing to work on it. We continue to communicate back and forth with them, and they review things with us. And they're really wonderful. And so as we work through this, though, we settled on our starting point was this ping system, which basically is a universal system agnostic way to introduce a notable interruption into the system for safety tools that use that, for safety tools that need to be able to interrupt the group. And it's done anonymously. But then we also introduced things like we worked with them to create a bunch of sheets and templates for our system that are for different popular safety tools like lines and veils, things like that. And we also added the ability to create collaborative and anonymous editing on some of these shared sheets. So that way people can also anonymously like note when something crossed the line for them, or it makes them uncomfortable, or when there's a boundary that they worry that will get crossed in the future. And then we also created a UI that has a full cited list of like the most popular safety systems that exist. And that's stuff that we keep updating as well. So all of that stuff came together because, again, like, we wanted to make sure we had our eye on it at the very beginning, as early as possible. We wanted to make sure that people had that stuff as early as possible. As our feature set evolves, those features will also evolve. But I'd like to think that even now, even with the simple version that we have today, we've made some pretty good first steps towards as agnostic and universal version of this as we possibly can, set of tools that anyone can use for the safety systems that they like, and resources to learn more about safety systems if they don't know. And so that's what we've tried to do.
It's really interesting because like an anonymous ping system, I feel like makes the experience almost safer than it would be in real life. And it's a weird thing to think about. I'm sure you guys have thought about this a lot. Just the evolution of, would people in the future choose to play a tabletop RPG online, even if they had the choice of playing it in person, when it gets to the stage where all these systems exist that create, such a better experience. Even, your imagination is a huge part in these campaigns, in these games. But I'm sure you guys are thinking about ways that you can integrate artwork, or I think like concept art, and people get pieces of artwork commissioned after campaigns because that's how closely tied they are to the character. Do you guys have any vision of how you want to start integrating content into role, and so it's not just a service, but it's actually, I don't know, it elevates, because you guys are game developers and software engineers, and I feel like it's an interesting balance. Where do you guys fall on that scale of wanting to kind of create that content for the player, or just providing a service for them?
Yeah, so we right now today we do have a bunch of features for what we call like asset management, which is really not fun sounding way to explain it, but basically what it is the ability for people to do things like add reference images, concept art, maps, things like that, and share them with their whole group when they're playing over video, right? So it's meant to be intuitive and super easy and super fast, and a lot of people use it. And I mean, we certainly use it in our games that we play, and most of our users use it. And so we've continued to work on expanding that system. We're actually working on some features now that are going to hopefully further empower people in that way, where you'll be able to actually create like bundles of assets and then share them with people. So you'll be able to actually create, like, for example, like let's say that you're a really passionate game master slash writer slash storyteller, and you create your own custom adventure for your favorite game, and you have a bunch of cool artwork that you've commissioned for it, or that you've collected, or that you've drawn yourself, and you have some like maps and things you've made. You have all these assets that are like part of this adventure that you wrote that you're very proud of. Now, obviously, you would then take that and play it with your group, but also you may want to share it with people online. And right now, most people who do that, they end up having to share it through like a Google Drive link, or like a Dropbox, or like some people do it on like their Patreon page or something like that. And what we're trying to do is provide people a system where it's like they can upload all that stuff, and then they can bundle it up within Roll, share it out to anyone. And then when somebody takes that share link, they can open Roll, and all of that stuff automatically integrates into their system, so they can just jump right in and play this creation. That's something that's coming in the very near future from us. But we've continued to work on and expand that. And we have, as you said, like we focus a lot on the tool side early on. I'm kind of a big believer in the idea of like, if you don't give people a really wonderful way to connect and play, then none of the other stuff matters. Like the play experience needs to be really good. And the social experience needs to be really good. Like the person to person experience needs to be really good. So we focused on that for the first like year. And we still are, but our team has grown. And so now we actually do have our first in-house game title in development right now, which is going to be launching this fall. And we're really super excited about it, because it's our first attempt at really trying to, innovate in a way where we can create a role-playing game that is digital native. So this is not going to be like a PDF document that you can just read and print out. Even though there are a lot of people who've gotten really good at making those, like some of the layout design that I see of people's work are really cool. But we're going to take our skills, or we are taking our skills as technologists, builders, and we're making a more native web experience that integrates into Roll, where you'll be able to actually like have a more immersive, cool kind of like hybrid experience between like a game rule book, but also like an immersive media experience with like imagery and things that come up, the ability to like automatically generate encounters and things on the fly. So you'll be like, this kind of circles back to that idea we talked about like GMless play, right? Like we want people to be able to have an experience where they're playing with their friends with no GM, and somebody's like, all right, we turned the corner, and you'd be like, all right, well, Carl, it's your turn. Like you turned the corner. What do we see? And you'd like hit a button on your side of the app, and it would say like, you turn the corner and you see this like cyborg monstrosity lumbering towards you and its eyes gleam in the dark. Like, what do you tell the group? And it's like a prompt. And then you turn and you tell the group, like, this is what I see.
Yeah.
And somebody else is like, oh no, I'm going to throw a flashbang grenade. Like everybody starts to pile on by doing it through, interactive prompts and stuff, but doing it in a way where it doesn't just feel like a choose your own adventure thing where you're just getting served text, doing it in a way where it feels a little more media rich, a little bit more immersive, a little bit more stylized, but always balancing that against, and again, this is why we focus on the service first, balancing that against making sure that the social experience is front and center, right? Like, I think one of the things that I'm sure you've seen when looking through our product is like, we're pretty different from a lot of the other offerings in the market, mostly because we focused on being a video chat experience above all else first with regards to play. And that's based on our idea that at the end of the day, the people are the game. Yeah. And so the people should be the most important thing in the user experience. And so it's really like, everything else we do, any sort of immersive game UI stuff, any sort of immersive materials, assets and stuff are really meant to be window dressing that enhance your immersion, but you're going to spend like 85 to 90% of your time focused on the people that you're talking to. Yeah. And so we're trying to balance that. And I'm really excited to start showing off the game we're working on, in the coming months, because I think people are going to be really blown away, because it's not even, there are some other really cool projects that exist that are like digital native. There are a couple of companies and designers that have started to figure out how to do their own stab at this. But I think ours is especially unique because we can integrate it into this video play experience in a really powerful way. And I think people are going to be pretty surprised by what that looks like. And I hope it will result in more immersive play for people.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. I feel like the potential for innovation is huge for what can happen. So I'm definitely really excited to see what you guys come up with. And just being just ingrained in the community and seeing how you see the community growing and the kind of market building. I'm really fascinated by that and how it's going to meet with the games industry, because it is all kind of getting blurred. If you had if you had 10 points to allocate to software development and then game development, like how many points would you allocate to each for role? Like how do you balance the two? Like you mentioned the video first is the most important part, but it does sound like you've got a big amount of attention on developing these games. What would your answer be for that?
I would say that right now, today, we probably are like 7 to 8 points on product, on software, and then 2 to 3 points on game. Yeah. And it's not because our focus isn't on making a great game. Like we do have a belief that like everything we try to do at Roll, we should try to do to the best possible quality we can. Like nothing is meant to be like a fire and forget test project. Everything is build it with the expectation that people are going to love it. Like make it something worth loving. And so, we have some really great talent that we've brought in for the game development side. And we've just also brought in a ton of really great talent on the software side. And, that's probably going to be true for quite a while because I think the reality is there are a huge long list of software challenges that need to be solved for this industry, for this community. And while we're not the only people in the space doing it, and I'm excited about that, like it's really cool to be part of a growing software community of people who are understanding and excited about the fact that this is a turning point for role-playing games. But even then, again, like I said, we have kind of a contrarian take on how our software works and looks and feels. Like we're pretty different from everybody else. So and I don't think that's not a mark of quality, us versus them or anything. It's just a matter of embracing the fact that a lot of the challenges that we face, we have to think about them differently than some of the other software that exists out there. And so there are certain learnings that we can take from what has been successful in the past, but a lot of things for us are new. And so what we end up having to do is we have to focus really strongly on the software side, because I think, again, like we want it to be a people-centric experience. We also want it to be a highly accessible experience. We want it to be easy to understand, powerful. We want it to feel open and creative in a way that allows anybody to dive right in. We focus on really making it like a really premium and really high quality learnable user experience. And so with the desire to do that while serving a really broad game industry where the difference between one game to the next can be pretty wide. It's a lot of different interesting challenges. So as we look at like for example, like our system for creating character sheets and creating templates and stuff, like we launched a beta version of that last year. It's gotten a lot of really positive traction with our play community and our creation community. But even then, like we've been looking at it, we've been saying like, damn, like this, we have to revise this thing significantly because it could be 1,000 times better. It could be so much more powerful. It could be so much more intuitive. It could open up the door for so many more interesting game mechanics. Because really at the end of the day, the tools that we create on our side are about two things. Like they are about play. They are about like that social experience, but they're also about creation. One of the things that we say a lot as well internally, we have a lot of like things that we say all the time, kind of like we have like little mantras. One of them is that tabletop games are the most accessible form of game design because all you need to know how to do is write. That's it. And so one of the things that I think has been a struggle for a lot of people who are very talented and growing their talent in the role-playing game space, in the tabletop game space, is that bringing their work to digital native audiences can be challenging because there's oftentimes barriers for entry. Like sometimes it's like using software products where you then have to know how to code in order to like build your thing into the product, right? You need to know how to do basic HTML, basic CSS. Or it could be that you're serving your content on a platform that isn't really catered to these types of games. And so you're kind of square peg round hole on like how you sell and distribute. Again, I use like the Patreon example. Like Patreon is an awesome service. But I follow a lot of Patreon accounts of people who are making really cool RPG stuff. And you can start to see the strain there of like, these people are starting to hit a wall with like what they can and can't do with this software. And they probably need additional software to tack onto that experience. And so for us, we strive to make it so that all of the things that you need, and again, it's a long road to walk down, but all the tools you need to create from scratch, from zero, you can do on roll, code-free, super intuitive, learnable. We want it to be as accessible as that idea of like, all you need to know how to do is write. And so I would say we're not all the way there yet. We've done a good job with the first few things we've tried. But again, we're working towards this ever-growing software problem of how do we make it so that like you have a full creation suite of, if you're either a professional or an indie or a hobbyist, doesn't matter who you are. If you want to create role-playing games and stuff and you want to serve them to your community, you should be able to log into Roll and be like, great, this is awesome. I don't need to learn anything, new and technical. I can just focus on what I'm good at, which is design and writing, and creating imaginary worlds. And so because of that, I think we're going to always have a super strong focus on software. And the only other thing I would add to that is that actually does inform the games we make. So even though it sounds like we have less focus on the games, we actually do still have a really strong focus on that, because with the first title that we're making and hopefully titles to make after this, we're trying to take the learnings that we've been gaining as we built the software side. And we're saying, okay, what if you built a game from scratch native to this type of software experience instead of trying to port a physical product to this software experience? Like, what does it look like? We have the benefit of, we can take those risks. So what does it look like when we make one from scratch? And if we make one from scratch that's really good, that people love, hopefully that helps create some more learning lessons for the rest of the industry. We can then go to our other partners, to other creators, and you can say, hey, like, we know you're doing all this really cool stuff over here. We've started to define a really great new strategy and model for how you could be doing it in a way that you can reach even more players. You can do more interesting stuff. You can make stuff that's more immersive, and do it without having to learn a bunch of things that are outside your wheelhouse.
In today's supporter segment, I'd like to point you towards GameUIDatabase.com. This is the perfect resource for anyone interested in seeing the UI and design of some of the most popular games and interesting indie titles out there. It has an incredible tagging system, and navigating the pages and games couldn't be easier. So if you're researching games for your own project, or you're just curious about how some of today's studios are being creative and unique with their work, check out GameUIDatabase.com. Back to the show. Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with people on the podcast about just game platforms and what a platform is. When you think of things like Roblox and just like private servers on Minecraft and how that's all evolving. And I see you guys as a platform as well. A platform for people to create their own stories, and that's definitely in line with that. So I think that's awesome. And I love how talented you guys are in the software space. That you guys, how big is your team, if I may ask? Because the amount of content that you guys push. I read that you guys have a matchmaking system, a marketplace. You guys are offering amazing features. How big is the team behind Roll?
We're 5 now.
Wow, that's so
Mhm.
small.
Yeah, and to be fair, not all of those features are out, so
Yeah.
that's part of the process. We're 5 now. We are growing. We're still hiring. We're still growing. We have had the incredible, I don't know if you call it luck or fate or whatever, or just opportunity, that we have a lot of really great partners now that have made it so that I think our ability to further access more and more talented people who are passionate about role playing to join our team has really grown. One of the things that I love that I kind of always knew was true, right? Like working in tech and games and things like that for most of my career, is there are a lot of people who have always loved this stuff, who, when you go to them and you say, hey, like, you can do this for work now, like you can make role-playing game software. People are like, what, really? Oh my God, like I want to do that. Like I had somebody that I was interviewing a little while back, and they were like, they made the metaphor joke. They were like, I feel like my whole career up until this moment has been my character's epic backstory, and now I'm finally meeting my party and getting ready to go on an adventure. Like, it's like people get really excited, and that makes me happy, because like I just I like to work with people, obviously, who are excited to do the same things we're doing, but also I always take that as a signal that we're on the right track, that we're doing something that people love, and that's what matters. And so like I said, we're 5 right now. We're still growing. We still have features to ship. Like the player matching system is not out yet. That's actually part of we have a suite of features that we're calling our community hubs, that are a big push that we're kind of aggressively moving towards. And so that will come. And then like marketplace features and stuff aren't fully live yet. And there's a reason for also like the order that we've tackled these things in. Like, again, I talk a lot about wanting to learn and understand the model of how people play and create first, which is why we focus on the social tools and the creation tools and the gameplay tools first.
Yep.
Because our thought is we have to make sure that people are having the best possible play and creation experience before we start to plug them into what I would call like meta activities, like community building, sales, things like that. Because I don't want people buying things that they don't love, and I don't want people getting frustrated trying to form communities around content and or types of play that they end up not enjoying, because then they will arrive, they will do all the legwork, and then they will find that this isn't actually where their joy can be found. And so for us, we focus first on like, well, let's make sure that the thing you do, the playing and the creating, is like really amazing for people. And we're getting there. I think we're getting there more rapidly than I had even hoped, which is amazing and wonderful. And as we start to tighten that stuff up and hone in on it, we can then bring our focus back to the other things that we've designed and promised, so that we can build a full ecosystem for this community. Because as you said, like, we strive to be a platform. We're not striving to be just one tool for the industry. We want to be kind of where your friends live, where your world lives, where your imagination lives. That's how we think about it.
It's funny. I had this thought a few weeks ago about making the podcast, developing a game around the podcast. So I'd interview guests through like a game experience, and I feel like Roll could, I was like, oh, we should have this interview through Roll, like that could work. And then you could create like a whole interview experience around just the RPG experience, and it's a very it's a very like abstract way to think about Roll as a platform, but who knows how people might use it once you guys provide the tools in the future, which is what I think is exciting about platforms, is that you don't really know how people will use it, or you don't know what's going to become the first big hit on that platform. That's really exciting. I'd love to talk to you a bit about the journey of Roll. So back in 2015, I believe you and Ian created an app for people to have an RPG experience on their mobiles, so that you weren't required to have the the boards and the tokens and everything in front of you. What was that journey like from? Well, I'd actually love to take it a step back. Like, what brought you to that point of creating that? Like, what's your game development journey been like that led you to that point of creating that app?
Yeah, so that's a great place to start. It's actually it's a really funny origin story to this company as well. So Ian and I, my co-founder Ian, we're best friends. We've known each other since we were 13 years old, and pretty much our friendship has been defined from the beginning as the things that we can create together. We're both super passionate gamers, game creators, super passionate storytellers, and technologists. We've made, all sorts of apps and games and movies and things together. We like when we were in high school, we used to do stop motion animation movies, that kind of stuff. And this is technically actually our second business together. We ran an agency previously, with a focus on the intersection between technology, play, and storytelling. We ended up doing a bunch of like VR work and some really cool projects there. But at the very beginning of that agency's life, when we started that company back in 2015, we had this idea of, we had just left our previous jobs and spun up this business, and we thought, this is a perhaps once in a lifetime opportunity. We have some breathing room right now to do a project nobody will pay us for. Like that was the idea. And we were like, let's just do something really cool as a portfolio piece that we know no client would ever pay us for, but that shows what we're capable of, shows that like we're really good, and like we've built up a lot of talent, and we have a unique perspective, right? So we sat down and we were like, what should we make? Like, what do we love? And we had come back to this idea for this role-playing thing, which actually started in college. I had done a napkin doodle in college about, I had just gotten out of like a long D&D session that weekend with some college friends, and it was fun, but also like really frictional. There was like a lot of stuff that like, it started to get slow, and it's college, so people are getting distracted and tired and whatever. And I remember getting back to my apartment, and I had a piece of paper, like a notepad paper, napkin size type of thing. I call it napkin sketch. And I was like, there's got to be a way to make this as easy to get into and as simple as like apples to apples, like as like that game, which was also, that was a really popular thing at the time, like Cards Against Humanity, apples to apples, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I wrote a bunch of notes around like, all you really need is like a few skills and like a simple D6 dice roller, and you don't need anything else. Like I was like, what if you just threw everything out? What if you just brought this thing back to brass tacks? I didn't even know at the time that actually there's like a whole genre of games that are this exact idea. It's called OSR, old school revival or old school renaissance. It's basically people who are trying to do this exact thing. And it's become my favorite category of role-playing games. There's so many cool OSR games. And so, but I didn't even know that at the time. I was just doodling in my apartment, and I showed that to Ian, and he was like, "Oh, this is really cool. We should play it." And we like played it like just over the phone, and we were like, "Oh, this is really fun." So we brought that back like years later, 2015, starting this agency, and we were like, we could just take that and we could just make it into an app, because then we would abstract out the rest of the headache. Like then you'd have to know there's no like pieces and components to take care of anymore. There's no math to worry about. Like the app did everything, and so we designed that. We commissioned some artists that we were friends with from our time in tech and games to do some really beautiful art for the app. We created a couple of pre-made characters, pre-made scenarios. We also created tools for you to create your own. And again, the app was meant to be really, really simple. And it wasn't even meant to be like an online play thing. It was really meant to be like you could just sit around with friends at lunch and like pull your phones out and play. And we did. We played it like with friends, like cafes and stuff. And we launched it on the App Store, and never thought about it again. Like besides like just playing it with friends and occasionally bring it up as a portfolio piece to show, clients and things, be like, oh, this is what we're capable of. Like, it's a really cool thing. And just kept going on with our work. Then after a couple of years of working at that agency, we ended up spinning that business down, because both Ian and I and our team, we had grown a team at that point. Everyone had kind of, to be honest, like gotten a little fatigued doing agency work. I think we all had the same feeling, which was like, we really just want to have something that's like ours, that's like our thing that we make. And so we all we spun that down. And we made sure the team, everybody landed well. So like I had a bunch of people like ended up at like Amazon and like, other places where they landed okay. So everybody was okay. I was happy with how the team split up. And then Ian and I took some time away. We were like, what are we going to work on next? And then I was out to lunch with like a friend colleague of ours from that time, and we were going through a bunch of stuff, and our colleagues, they were like going through our old website. They were like, what's this role thing that you guys did? This is like 2019, so this is like 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, it's this role playing thing. I was like, it's like D&D, but on your phone. I was like, I don't know. I kind of got self conscious about it. I was like, you probably don't care about that. I was like, you don't seem like you're into role playing games. And they were like, no, that's really cool. They were like, I've never seen anything like that before. They were like, do you know how did it do? And we were like, I don't know. We put it on the app store. We didn't think about it anymore. And they were like, can you pull up your app store analytics? So we like opened. Ian had his laptop with him, so he pulled his laptop out. He opens it up, and he like logs into the app store, and like had to remember his password and stuff like we're trying to figure out what we're doing. Log into the app store, and we were like, oh my god, we had 100,000 people on this app.
Wow.
And we were like, oh my god, there's like all these people playing role. Like, when did this happen? Like, it must have been just people just finding it. Like, we didn't do any advertising or anything.
Wow.
And so then that sparked this whole thing. We started going through like our social media. We started going through like our old email accounts, and we found all these like really beautiful messages from people saying like, oh, I use this in my classroom to teach kids how to collaborate together, or somebody else saying like, I play this on lunch break with my friends, or somebody being like, I use this to play with my kids. And we were like, there's really something here. And we also started to make a note of like all the requests we were getting. People were like, they had a bunch of, it started to become common requests. It was like, one was like, this is really great, but I wish that it was basically game agnostic. Like, I wish that I could play whatever game I want. I wish I could play D&D. I wish I could play Shadowrun. I wish I could play Numenera. I wish I could play my favorite game instead of just playing the game that you have baked in. Two, I wish it was online and specifically video. I wish I could do video chat with people. And three, I wish it was more hardware agnostic, because having it be locked to iOS is really restricting. A lot of people didn't have iOS. They wanted to play like on their tablet or their computer or their whatever. So we were like, okay, that's exciting. And we thought we were like, maybe this is the business. And so we prototyped Roll, and we ran a Kickstarter. Ian and I are big believers in the idea of like, don't make things for your community, make things with your community. Yeah. So we did the Kickstarter early because we wanted to make sure that we were on the right track for people. Like, we wanted to make sure we were asking the right questions and like learning from people. Like, what do you need? Like, what makes your play experience better? Like, what do you love? Like, what can we help make better? And we learned a lot even in that Kickstarter. Like, there's features that we now have in the app that like came out of people talking to us during the Kickstarter. And so we did that. That was really very promising. We launched our beta. We've been working on that for, well over a year and a half now. And here we are, like, we growing team, growing platform.
It's incredible. How did COVID, because obviously COVID would have brought a huge amount of attention to this. How, like, at what point did that come into the story and did that change any of your plans or vision of what the company looked like?
Honestly, no, not really.
That's so crazy. Just the timing was perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it was it's tragic, right? COVID is this, it's still happening, and a lot of the world is still reeling from it. And I think honestly, like, the one thing that COVID really did for us and affected us with is it really made every moment I could spend face to face with people really matter. Which further emphasized how important and powerful these game experiences are, right? It's like, whenever I would get online to play with people, like, it really just felt really powerful. And, it helped with like the depression, COVID isolation, like, people get depressed, myself included. Like, it helped with that, helped with the staying motivated to do something that people love, that makes them feel connected. But what I was going to say as a kind of an addendum to that is, this stuff was happening before COVID. Like, the online play component was happening way before COVID, and is here to stay. Pretty much, it's stuck now. Like, this is what we're doing. And the way that I think about it, and we talk about this a lot as well, is with every new technology and social paradigm that becomes adopted on a mass scale, one of the first things that human beings always try to do is we try to find a way to play. Because play is one of the fundamental human languages. It is a thing that crosses all cultures, all ages, all nationalities, all languages, everything. And so it makes sense, right? Like, over a decade ago, when we had the onset of social media and smartphones and stuff, we had the social games boom, which was basically a response to people want to play in these interfaces and these experiences, right? Now we live in a world where Zoom, Discord, Twitch, YouTube, et cetera, are becoming or already are actually, not just becoming, they are the dominant way in which we socialize, either synchronously like this, like we're doing right now, or asynchronously, consuming something, watching it, playing it, whatever. You look at successes of things like Critical Role, right? Critical Role is this huge show, people playing D&D, like it's just a bunch of people playing D&D together. And so it makes sense with all of the rise of video that people look for ways to play. And it happens to be that the most exciting thing to play over video is role-playing games. It makes perfect sense. It's fundamentally social. It's people-centric. It's creative. It's intimate, and it forms meaningful bonds. And so that was already happening before COVID. I think COVID certainly put a laser focus on how important it is to people, and I think that's really good. And it certainly was a stress test. Like a way to think about it is like, if role playing couldn't survive COVID, then it wasn't going to ever make it as an online phenomenon, because like during COVID, our social time became so precious to us, right? So if you're going to spend your time playing D&D or something like that, it has to be really delightful and wonderful and make you feel good. So, you know, that was, I think, where we landed with that. You know, other parts of the world, like besides, you know, the States where, you know, role-playing games are big here and whatever, other parts of the world that have really gotten into role-playing games over the last like decade or more almost exclusively play online. I read a really fascinating article the other day, and I might get the numbers not quite right, but basically in Japan, the role-playing game market has exploded. It's this huge thing now. The most popular role-playing game in Japan is the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. So not even D&D, they play Call of Cthulhu. And the demographic is overwhelmingly women aged 30 to 50.
Wow.
And they only play online. They do not play in person. They play over video. And this has become like the dominant gaming habit for that demographic, that audience. And that actually tracks with, like, we talk to like all of our players, as many people in our community as possible. We also talk to game creators. We talk to them about like, who's playing your stuff? What do they care about? What do they love? And this pretty much tracks. Like everybody we talk to, you start to see that as it becomes more and more of a global phenomenon, it's not people going online as an alternative to tabletop. It's people going online as the way they play. Like that's what they do. And for some people, it was the only way they've ever known. And so I think like we actually believe that the category of role-playing games is really more of a broader category of what we call online narrative play. And really, when we think about what role is in the future, we're really talking about creating spaces for people to have meaningful online narrative play with friends.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like I could hear you talk about this for hours, because you're really just opening up like a whole new side of games that I haven't really considered, but I know exists right around me. So this is really interesting. And what you mentioned before about just the kind of video first part, I had this thought that role-playing games might be a healthier way of gaming online, because when, you know, I think I mentioned Roblox earlier. When you think of Roblox, you're connecting with like another avatar that has really poor animations, and it's, you know, or, you know, block based, or it's, you know, it's a character. Whereas with role, you're connecting with a human, and that when you think of the experience that a lot of people had over COVID and suffering with depression and really struggling, I feel like an experience like role could be a healthier gaming experience that would open someone up rather than like closing them up. Do you resonate with that message, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I with unequivocally. I actually, growing up, I always had this idea as a personal identity thing of like not liking multiplayer games. I was like, I don't like playing online games. And I thought that was because I was the kind of person who just likes my solo games, like to play my Mass Effect, my Metal Gear, my Half-Life. Like I like, and I do. I love those games. I love a great story. I love being in the fiction. But what I really realized as I got older and engaged with more different types of online experiences, it's not that I don't like online gaming. It's that I don't like anonymity. Like I don't want to get online and play an avatar that is a virtual thing that is not me, and interact with people whom I don't know. And one, there's the obvious issue of anonymity breeds harassment. And to be fair, there is harassment in the tabletop gaming space, absolutely, and it's just as terrible as anywhere else. But the thing that I think is better here is that when you get to the actual act of play, it's pretty hard to have a bad, like a genuinely bad social interaction. I mean, unless somebody's being actively malicious, of course, but it's pretty hard to have a bad social interaction with a small group of like 4 to 6 people who you are all looking at each other face to face and you're trying to have a good time. It happens, of course, social dynamics are tough, but when you get together with people whom you try to have a good time together and try to tell a story together, like I think that the success rate is higher. The chances of success are higher, and the power of the experience is stronger. We have, with my group of friends, right, like obviously I'm biased because I do this for work now, but with my group of friends, we used to be really, really into we played Destiny a lot for a while. That was kind of our big online game. And then we all kind of slowly petered off because even though we weren't playing with strangers, we were only playing with each other and playing over chat. There was still like a disconnect of like, I'd hang out with my friends on a video game for 3 hours, and afterwards I'd log off and I'd be like, I don't really feel like I actually hung out with them. Like I didn't learn anything about their life. Like I didn't have like a meaningful conversation. Like I didn't feel like I really had like a moment. We were just yelling at each other over chat about, what thing to shoot and where to go and whatever. And then we started playing role-playing games together. And now that's what we do. We do it every week. Like that's our thing. We all get online and we get on roll and we play, and it's become our bonding activity. And actually the length and frequency of the commitments we make to play together are higher now than when we were playing video games. Because again, it's like when I log off, like we played last night, we played until like midnight last night. When I log off, I'm like, I feel really good. I'm like, I saw my friends. Like I was in their life. They were in my life. Like that was really good. And as I'm, older now, I'm not young and running around the city like I used to be. My friends, we've all, got lives. Like some of my friends have kids, like moved to different cities, like different places. So like, this is what we do. This is how we have that time. Time that we maybe when we were younger would have spent like running around in the park or going to a restaurant or something, right? Like it's different now. And I think that's really very powerful.
Yeah, I'm definitely sold. I'm sold on the whole vision. I see it. I think it's cool because it doesn't seem like you're chasing the dopamine rush. It's like you're actually just trying to be genuine and help those connections happen. And I think that is really important. So yeah, thank you so much for just explaining the story. I could talk to you about a lot more, but we're out of time on the podcast. There's probably one question I want to ask, which is a bit more abstract and philosophical, but I'd love to hear your answer. And I love asking these kind of questions to my guests. But what is for you the definition of storytelling, and how does that, like if you could define it, what would that be for you? Because that's a very big word.
Yeah. Wow. That's very abstract. I would say that one of the things that we get wrong in our culture is that we have too many rules around what is and isn't a story, right? Like I would wake up and read, social media and see something like so-and-so film director is angry that, the internet streaming has changed what is and isn't cinema. And I'm like, who cares? I'm like, if you're allowed to make your cool thing and other people are allowed to make their cool thing, who cares? Everybody's making their wonderful thing. Or like, I don't know, get in arguments, maybe not arguments, but like get in debates with family or friends being like, oh, is a video game a story? Like when I was a kid, like you get family members who don't understand games. They don't understand that it can be a story. I really think that we have too many rigid rules around what does and doesn't define a story, and what doesn't define like the right way to tell a story. I saw something, I think it was a film critic. They said something on, I think it was Twitter, and it really stuck with me, which is I have seen enough to know that I do not grade things in terms of quality anymore. I grade them in terms of resonance. Like, did that resonate with me or not? And I loved that. I was like, yes, because every piece of art, every story, everything resonates with someone. Otherwise, nobody would have wrote it down and nobody would have tried to show it to anybody. Like it meant something to them. That's why they made it. And so when I think about storytelling, to me, what it is it's just someone trying to convey meaning through imagination. And it can be very abstract, right? Like a story doesn't even have to have characters. You could be describing a color. Like it doesn't matter. What it is you're trying to convey an idea or a feeling through imagination. And through the creation of you're like transferring an idea to somebody else's mind through whatever tools you can, whether they're auditory, visual, written, and whatnot. And that's also why I think the power of role playing is so incredibly strong, because then that becomes a group activity. No one owns the idea, even in a game with a really rigid kind of dungeon or game master sort of role. No one owns the idea. We are all part of the idea. We're all doing it together. And then when you walk away from it, you're like, this is a thing that now exists in all of our minds that is a piece of all of us. Like a little piece of me lives in everybody else now that was part of making that story happen.
And wouldn't that be the definition of interactive media? You know, you're interacting with the environment, with other people. Yeah, that's really powerful. You did an amazing job of summing that up. I'm really that was incredible. Really loved that. Best answer I've heard on that topic in my life, and I'm definitely going to.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was really, really powerful, and I'm definitely, I definitely believe in you and the vision that you have for Roll, and I wish you guys the best with the future of the development and the game that you're about to release. I'm excited to see that and what that experience is like. And yeah, just thank you for giving me the time. If anyone's interested in following the Roll journey, you can find them at rollapp.com, or you can follow Logan on Twitter at Logan Wright.
Dwight.
Right?
Dwight.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Logan
DWIGHT.
Yeah, on Twitter, and yeah, follow the Roll journey. I wish you guys the best, and yeah, thanks again for giving me your time. Is there anything else you want to end on, whether it's plug something or tell something to the audience listening?
I could just do the shameless software plug. So with everything that we talked about, Roll is currently in beta. We are now in like full open beta. So essentially like there's no restriction. You can just come and play. So if anybody is excited and interested in trying Roll, like please just come and sign up, come and try. There's also an amazing fan-made Discord community that we don't run it. The fans just created it. That you can find all over our social media and whatnot. If you are trying to get into the experience of role playing and you want to meet more people and you want to learn how to play, that has served as an amazing place, especially in lieu of the fact that our community features are not, up and running yet. But we would love to have you, and we'd love to hear about the stories that you tell and the adventures that you create with your friends. So come and play with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. All right.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the show. I hope you found it valuable and learned something new about game development and the future of games. If you did, I'd love to hear about it. Please message me on Twitter at Zero2Play, and we can keep the conversation going there. If you want to hear the latest news of the show as soon as it's released, you can sign up to our newsletter or follow us on Twitter. For all of our episodes, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting service. All links can be found in the description below. Take care and see you all next week for a brand new episode.